Japan's long and rich history is not only shaped by its cultural achievements, art, and philosophies, but also by its deep fascination with the supernatural. One of the most intriguing aspects of Japanese culture is its extensive tradition of ghost lore, which spans centuries and reflects the country's unique relationship with death, the afterlife, and the spirits of the departed. Ghosts in Japan are not merely figures of fear, they are complex, multifaceted beings, often entwined with themes of revenge, duty, and love. From ancient mythological tales to the mesmerizing theater of the Edo period, Japanese ghosts have captivated both locals and outsiders, offering insights into the nation's spiritual and moral values. The concept of the ghost, or urei, in Japan goes far beyond the simple image of a spirit wandering aimlessly. It is a spirit that lingers, often due to unresolved emotions or unfulfilled duties. The word urei itself means faint spirit, referring to souls that have not fully crossed over to the afterlife. While many cultures have tales of vengeful spirits, Japan's version of these beings, Onryo, takes the concept to an intense level. These spirits, often betrayed or wronged in life, return with a deep, burning desire for vengeance that can bring devastation to the living. These haunting spirits are deeply tied to the emotional fabric of Japanese folklore and continue to influence modern depictions of the supernatural in Japan. The Japanese belief system, especially through Shinto and Buddhism, laid the foundation for many of these ghostly traditions. In Shinto, the reverence for ancestors was central, and spirits of the dead were believed to influence the living, either in benevolent or malevolent ways. When a person passed away without proper rituals or rites, their spirit was thought to become restless, sometimes becoming a gaki or a hungry ghost that could bring misfortune to the living. On the other hand, Buddhism introduced the concept of souls trapped by negative karma, leading to further complexities in how spirits were perceived in Japanese society. One of the most iconic aspects of Japanese ghost lore is the distinction between urei and yokai. While urei refers to human ghosts, yokai are a broader category of supernatural creatures, ranging from playful shape-shifting monsters to terrifying demons. Some yokai, like the Kappa, a water imp, or Oni, a demon, have become deeply embedded in Japanese culture and continue to appear in modern literature, theater, and media. The boundaries between these spirits and monsters are often blurred, as yokai can sometimes exhibit behaviors similar to ghosts, such as haunting or taking revenge. Over time, these ghostly figures evolved and gained prominence in Japanese society. The Edo period in particular saw the rise of kabuki theater and woodblock prints that popularized ghost stories. These tales not only served as entertainment, but also offered moral lessons, with many ghost stories reflecting societal anxieties, personal grievances, and emotional turmoil. The idea of a ghost returning from the afterlife to seek justice or revenge resonated with the public, giving these stories a sense of authenticity and power. Some of the most famous ghosts, like the betrayed wife Oe or the tragic Okiku, became symbols of unresolved emotions, embodying themes of betrayal, love, and the consequences of neglect. However, ghost stories in Japan were not just a form of horror. They were also a reflection of the culture's respect for the dead. Rituals and prayers were central to appeasing restless spirits, and ghost stories often emphasized the importance of proper rites and respect for the deceased. The concept of Obon, a festival where the spirits of the dead are honored, highlights the cultural importance of maintaining a connection with the past and ensuring that the dead are treated with reverence. As Japan entered the Meiji era and modernized, The rise of Western rationalism and scientific thinking led to skepticism toward traditional beliefs. Ghosts and spirits, once considered an integral part of Japanese life, began to be seen as relics of a superstitious past. However, the fascination with ghosts never truly disappeared. Writers, folklorists, and artists began to preserve and adapt these ghostly tales for a new era, ensuring that the rich tradition of Japanese ghost lore would continue to thrive in literature, theater, and popular media. In this exploration of Japanese ghost lore, we will delve into the origins, evolution, and cultural significance of these spirits. From ancient myths to the iconic ghost stories of the Edo period, we will uncover how these ghosts reflect the beliefs, fears, and hopes of the Japanese people throughout history, and how they continue to influence the supernatural landscape of modern Japan. So join us as we embark on this journey through the eerie, tragic, and fascinating world of Japanese ghosts. In the depths of Japan's misty forests, beneath the shadows of ancient temples, there are whispers of spirits Urei, as they are known in Japanese folklore. These ghosts are not just random phantoms wandering the earth. They are souls tethered to the living world by powerful, unresolved emotions, revenge, protection, and unfinished business. They are the lingering remnants of the past, forever bound to a world they cannot leave, until the day their purpose is fulfilled. One such story begins long ago, during the tumultuous Edo period, where the delicate balance between the living and the dead was ever so fragile. In a small village nestled between towering mountains, there lived a young woman named Akiko. She was a peaceful soul, dedicated to her family and the village that had raised her. Her life was simple yet joyful, filled with the sounds of laughter and the scent of blooming cherry blossoms that filled the air each spring. But her tranquility was shattered one fateful evening when her beloved husband, Ryo, went off to war. Like many of the young men in the village, he was drafted into the samurai ranks, bound by honor and duty to fight for the shogun. As the days turned into months, Akiko's once serene life became filled with worry and longing. Her thoughts never strayed far from Ryo, and she spent every waking moment praying for his safe return. One day, word came to the village Ryo had died in battle. The pain Akiko felt was immeasurable, a sorrow so deep that it threatened to consume her entire being. But there was more to the story than she had been told. As she mourned, Akiko learned of a terrible betrayal, a betrayal that would forever alter her view of the world. Ryo had not died a noble death. He had been tricked, deceived by a fellow samurai who had coveted his position and his honor. It was a plot woven from lies and envy, a scheme that cost Ryo his life, all for the ambitions of one man. Akiko's grief quickly turned to fury, and that fury gave rise to a powerful force, a force that bound her husband's spirit to the mortal realm. Ryo's soul was not allowed to rest. It was driven by anger, and that anger transformed him into something darker. He became an Onryo, a vengeful spirit, seeking justice for the wrongs that had been done to him. Akiko, now consumed with grief and rage, set out on a journey to find Ryo's killer. Her heart no longer beat with the softness of a wife's love. He was hardened by the weight of vengeance. She sought the guidance of the village's elderly spiritual leaders, and they spoke of the ancient rituals that might appease the restless spirit of her husband. But Akiko knew, deep within her, that no amount of prayer could end the torment. The vengeance that had overtaken Ryo's spirit was a hunger that could only be sated by the blood of the one who had wronged him. As the days wore on, Akiko's quest became more desperate. She roamed through the mountains, across the plains, and through the bustling cities. asking anyone she met if they had seen the man who had taken her husband's life. The village elders had warned her, "Beware the vengeance of the Onryo. Their wrath is unrelenting, and their journey often leads to destruction." But Akiko would not be deterred. Her love for Ryo, now twisted by the desire for justice, fueled her determination. In the dead of night, her journey finally brought her to a small, remote temple, where she learned that the man who had betrayed Ryo had taken refuge. With her heart racing, she made her way through the overgrown garden and into the darkened temple, where the flickering candlelight cast long, haunting shadows. There, in a room filled with the scent of incense and the full weight of centuries of history, Akiko confronted the man responsible for her husband's death. In a voice cold with fury, Akiko demanded that he face the consequences of his treachery. The man, pale and trembling, confessed to his crime, his jealousy, his hunger for power. But even in his confession there was no remorse. His eyes gleamed with a selfish satisfaction, knowing that he had won even in death. And with that, Akiko struck him down. As the man's lifeless body fell to the floor, a strange stillness descended over the room. But then, as if the very air around her had come alive, Akiko felt a shift. She turned, and there before her stood Ryo, his ghostly figure, pale and translucent, hovering in the darkness. His face was twisted in pain, his eyes clouded with sorrow. But his presence was undeniable. His anger had been quelled, but only for a moment. The deed had been done, and the weight of the past could now be laid to rest. Ryo's spirit, freed from the chains of vengeance, began to fade away, leaving behind only the faintest trace of his presence. Akiko, standing alone in the temple, felt the heaviness of her actions. She had avenged her husband's death. But at what cost? The love she had once known had been replaced by a darker force, one that had consumed both her and her husband. In the years that followed, the tale of Akiko and Ryo became legend. Their story, told by the elders to children and travelers alike, carried with it a powerful lesson. The spirits of the dead, especially those bound by anger and sorrow, are not easily appeased. They linger, and their influence can shape the world of the living. Akiko's journey was a testament to the strength of love and vengeance, but it also served as a warning that the unresolved business of the past has a way of haunting the present. And so, as the years passed, the village would remember. They would remember the story of a woman whose love for her husband was so powerful that it gave birth to a spirit of vengeance, and how, in the end, the restless dead were not the only ones who could not find peace. In the heart of Japan, amidst the mist-covered mountains and hidden temples, there is a chilling belief that the souls of the dead, if not allowed to rest peacefully, can linger in the living world. These spirits are known as Urei, restless souls, trapped between this world and the next, unable to move on due to unfinished business, unresolved emotions, or lack of proper rites. But there is another kind of spirit that roams the earth with an even darker purpose. These are the Onryo, vengeful spirits, often women wronged in life, who return from beyond the grave to exact retribution on those who caused their suffering. These spirits are not simply haunting the living. They are seeking revenge, and they will stop at nothing to bring harm to those who wronged them. The legend of the Urei and Onryo goes back centuries, deeply intertwined with Japan's cultural, spiritual, and religious practices. In ancient times, it was believed that the souls of the deceased, if not properly respected or guided, could become restless. The spirit of a loved one would not be at peace unless the living performed rituals to honor and appease them. In Shinto, the indigenous faith of Japan, proper ancestor worship and rituals were essential to maintain harmony and avoid angering the spirits. Failure to do so could lead to the spirits becoming Urei, souls trapped in a limbo between life and death. These restless souls were believed to harbor resentment and sorrow, emotions so intense that they could alter the lives of the living. It was during these early times that the stories of Onryo began to take shape. The Onryo are not just any restless spirits. They are those who, in life, experienced deep injustice, betrayal, heartbreak, and unfulfilled love. These spirits are often the souls of women who have suffered great wrongs, such as being betrayed by a lover or husband, being unjustly accused, or enduring a life filled with hardship and sorrow. When these women died, their spirits could not rest. Instead, they were consumed with rage and a desire for vengeance. The anger that burned in their hearts caused them to rise from their graves, not in peace, but with one goal: to bring suffering to those responsible for their pain. Take, for instance, the tragic tale of Oiwa, one of the most famous Onryo stories in Japan. Oiwa was a beautiful woman whose husband, Iyemon, betrayed her for another woman. After being poisoned and left to die, Oiwa's spirit returned from the grave in a horrific form, her face disfigured, her hair wild, and her eyes full of hatred. Her vengeful spirit sought out her unfaithful husband, driving him to madness and ultimately to his own death. Oiwa's tale is a chilling reminder of the power of a wronged spirit, a force that cannot be ignored, for the vengeance of an Onryo is relentless. The Onryo are not just vengeful spirits. They are a force of nature, driven by powerful emotions and fueled by an intense desire for justice. These spirits do not merely haunt the living. They possess the power to cause physical harm, manipulating the world around them to exact their revenge. They bring disaster, death, and misfortune to those they target. The fear surrounding Onryo is not just based on folklore. It is rooted in the belief that their power can alter the fabric of reality itself. The Onryo can bring storms, fires, plagues, and even death to those they curse. It is said that once an Onryo is marked a target, there is little anyone can do to stop their wrath. But what makes the Onryo so terrifying is not just their ability to cause harm, but the knowledge that these spirits were once human beings living, breathing people with hopes, dreams, and emotions. In their past lives, they were loved and cared for, but something went terribly wrong, leading them down a path of betrayal and heartbreak. The Onryo remind us of the fragility of life and the consequences of our actions. They are the embodiment of the pain and suffering that can arise when a person is wronged, and they serve as a warning to all who encounter them. However, not all Urei and Onryo are driven by vengeance or malice. While many of these spirits seek revenge, others return from the afterlife for more benevolent reasons. There are tales of Urei who, instead of bringing harm, come back to offer guidance or protection to their loved ones. These spirits, though still bound to the mortal world, seek to help those they left behind. The difference between a vengeful Onryo and a peaceful Urei lies in the nature of the death and the emotions left unresolved. If a person dies with a clear conscience or with their affairs in order, their spirit is more likely to find peace. But if a person dies with anger, jealousy, or regret, their spirit may become an Onryo, a restless soul destined to cause pain. In the Edo period, the belief in Onryo and Urei was so deeply ingrained in Japanese culture that these spirits became a central theme in theater, literature, and art. Kabuki plays, for example, often featured vengeful female ghosts, whose tragic stories were dramatized for the audience. These plays were not just for entertainment. They reflected societal fears and anxieties about the power of the dead and the consequences of mistreating others. The ghostly figures of the Onryo became symbols of justice as they sought to right the wrongs of the living, even if it meant bringing suffering and destruction in their wake. But as the years passed, Japan's modernization in the Meiji era brought about a shift in societal beliefs. The rationalism of the Western world began to influence the way the Japanese viewed the supernatural. Ghosts and spirits, once seen as real forces in the world, were now regarded as mere superstition by many in the intellectual elite. Yet, despite this shift, the stories of Onryo and Urei never truly disappeared. They remained in the cultural consciousness, passed down through generations in books, movies, and folklore. Even today, the stories of the Onryo and Urei continue to captivate audiences around the world. They remind us of the power of emotion, how love, betrayal, and grief can transcend death and bring about change, whether for better or for worse. These spirits, both vengeful and peaceful, continue to haunt the pages of literature and the stages of theater, offering us a glimpse into the emotional and spiritual world of the Japanese people. Through these stories, we are reminded that the dead are not always gone. They linger, watching, waiting for the moment when their unfinished business will be fulfilled. And when that moment comes, there is no escaping the consequences. In the heart of Japan's ancient folklore, there exists a fascinating world of supernatural beings that go far beyond the traditional concept of ghosts. While spirits such as Urei and Onryo linger in the minds of the living, haunted by unfinished business or vengeful emotions, there are other, equally captivating creatures that move through the shadows of folklore yokai. These enigmatic beings are not necessarily ghosts. Rather, they are a diverse array of supernatural entities, ranging from mischievous monsters to terrifying demons, all of which have been woven into the fabric of Japan's cultural storytelling for centuries. Unlike the Urei, who are the souls of the dead seeking to complete their unfinished business, yokai are creatures that often exist beyond the realm of human experience. They take on many forms and can embody a wide range of characteristics, some frightening, some humorous, and others possessing qualities that are both strange and alluring. While the Onryo may embody the wrath of the wronged dead, yokai exist as a separate class of beings, often born from natural phenomena, human emotions, or pure imagination. Among the most famous of these creatures are the kappa, mischievous water creatures, and the oni, terrifying demons that have captured the collective imagination of the Japanese people for centuries. Both of these entities, along with many others, serve as a vivid reminder of the deep connection between folklore and the human experience in Japan. The kappa, for instance, is a water-dwelling creature that appears in many ancient tales, often depicted as small humanoid beings with green skin, a beak-like mouth, and a dish-like depression on their heads filled with water. The kappa is known for its mischievous behavior. In some stories, kappa are playful and harmless, but in others, they are dangerous creatures that lurk in rivers and ponds, waiting to drag unsuspecting victims into the water. Their affinity for water is so strong that if the water in their heads ever spills, they lose all their strength and power. This vulnerability has led to various tales of humans tricking the kappa by bowing to them, knowing that the creature, being compelled by politeness, would bow back, causing the water to spill and rendering it powerless. Despite the potentially deadly nature of the kappa, they also represent a more comical side of yokai lore. Their playful and trickster-like qualities often bring humor into their stories, which contrasts sharply with the dark, vengeful nature of Onryo. The kappa embodies the strange duality of yokai. They can be both terrifying and humorous, a reflection of the unpredictability of the supernatural world in Japanese culture. On the other end of the yokai spectrum, we find the oni, towering demons with frightening features that have become synonymous with evil in Japanese folklore. Oni are often depicted as large, ogre-like creatures with horns, sharp teeth, and fiery eyes. They are typically portrayed as brutish and malicious, capable of causing harm to both humans and nature. The Onin often appear in stories of vengeance and destruction, sometimes acting as agents of chaos who disrupt the harmony of the world. The Oni are frequently associated with the afterlife and the underworld, where they are said to serve as tormentors of the damned. In Buddhist folklore, they guard the gates of hell, tormenting the souls of the wicked. The Oni is also known for its role in Japanese festivals, most notably the Setsuban, where people throw beans at actors dressed as Oni in a ritual believed to drive away evil spirits and bring good fortune for the coming year. This association with both fear and protection highlights the complex nature of yokai. While they may embody danger, they also serve as symbols of purification and the battle between good and evil. While the kappa and oni are among the most famous yokai, they are far from the only ones in Japanese folklore. The world of yokai is vast, and within it exists a variety of creatures, each with their own unique characteristics and roles in storytelling. There are Tengu, winged mountain goblins known for their mischievous behavior, Yuki Onna, the ghostly snow woman who appears in blizzards to freeze travelers, and Jorogumo, the spider demon who lures victims into her lair with the promise of love before revealing her true, deadly form. Some yokai are protective, such as the Zashiki Warashi, a childlike ghost that haunts homes and brings good luck, while others, like the Jikininki, are grotesque creatures that feed on human flesh. What is fascinating about yokai is their ability to transcend traditional notions of good and evil. While Onryo are driven by a singular, often destructive goal, revenge, yokai can be both protectors and tormentors, shape-shifting from one form to another. Their stories often serve to reflect the complexity of the human condition. In some ways, they represent the fears and desires of the people, acting as metaphors for the unknown, the uncontrollable, and the unpredictable aspects of life. The relationship between yokai and humans is one of respect, fear, and sometimes even admiration. Many yokai stories teach lessons about human behavior, cautioning against greed, betrayal, and disrespect for nature, while also celebrating the importance of balance and harmony in life. The belief in yokai reflects a broader cultural understanding of the natural world and the supernatural as intertwined forces. The belief that the spirits of nature and the elements can take on physical form through creatures like the kappa and oni shows how the Japanese people have long understood the world around them as a complex interplay of forces, both seen and unseen. As Japan modernized during the Meiji era and beyond, the belief in yokai and their role in society began to wane. However, these creatures have not been forgotten. Today, they continue to capture the imagination of people through literature, movies, anime, and manga. In many ways, the yokai have undergone a transformation in modern media, moving from fearsome demons and tricksters to beloved characters in popular culture, yet their origins remain deeply rooted in the ancient folklore of Japan, reminding us of a time when the boundaries between the living and the supernatural were not as clearly defined. In the world of yokai, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. These creatures, sometimes terrifying, sometimes humorous, embody the complexity and mystery of the supernatural world. As we look back at the stories and legends passed down through generations, we are reminded that the yokai are more than just monsters or spirits. They are reflections of our own deepest fears, desires, and understanding of the natural world. Whether they are seen as agents of chaos, protectors of the home, or mere tricksters, yokai remain an indelible part of Japan's rich cultural tapestry, continuing to inspire awe and wonder in all who encounter them. In the rich and haunting folklore of Japan, ghosts are not merely drifting spirits, aimlessly wandering the world of the living. Far from it. Japanese ghosts, whether they are Urei or Onryo, are often tied to specific, powerful purposes when they return. Unlike the common perception of ghosts as passive entities, these spirits are deeply connected to the emotions, actions, and lives of those left behind. Their return is not for casual visits. They have clear, often compelling reasons for haunting the living. Whether seeking revenge, protecting those they loved, or fulfilling an uncompleted duty, these spirits remain tethered to the mortal realm until their mission is completed. One of the most prominent reasons for a ghost's return is the powerful drive for vengeance. The Onryo, a vengeful spirit, is perhaps the most infamous manifestation of this vengeful force in Japanese folklore. Often depicted as a woman wronged in life, Onryo are not passive or gentle spirits. They return from the afterlife, their spirits burning with rage. Angered by betrayal, death, or abandonment, these spirits often seek revenge on those who have wronged them, bringing terror, misfortune, or even death to the living. Their anger is so intense that it defies the boundaries of life and death, compelling them to return to the mortal world to exact retribution. Take, for instance, the tragic tale of Oiwa, one of the most famous Onryo stories in Japan. Oiwa's husband, Aemon, betrayed her with another woman, leading to Oiwa's poisoning and eventual death. But it was not merely the act of betrayal that kept Oiwa's spirit from finding peace. It was the vengeful anger that consumed her soul. After her death, Oiwa's ghost returned, disfigured and monstrous, and her vengeful spirit sought out Aemon, driving him to madness, and ultimately to his own demise. Oiwa's story is a chilling reminder of how powerful the need for revenge can be, so much so that it can transcend death itself. Her tale is just one example of many where Onryo spirits haunt their wrongdoers, refusing to rest until justice is done. However, not all ghosts are driven by anger or a desire for revenge. Many return to protect those they loved in life. These spirits often take the form of Urei, spirits of the deceased who have not yet moved on but come back with no malicious intent. Instead, these spirits are motivated by a deep sense of love, duty, and attachment to their loved ones. In this way, Urei are spirits of unfinished business, whose return is motivated by the need to safeguard the living, even from beyond the grave. These protective spirits are often seen in tales where a mother or father, after passing, watches over their children, ensuring their safety and happiness. A classic example of a protective Urei can be found in the story of the Urei of the Tengu Mountain. The story tells of a mother who passed away, leaving behind her child. The child, now alone and vulnerable, begins to feel the weight of the world upon them. However, unbeknownst to the child, the mother's spirit lingers, silently protecting them. The mother's ghost, though gone from the physical world, still watches over her child, ensuring that they are never truly alone. It is said that the mother's spirit guides the child through difficult moments in life, offering guidance and protection when needed. Her return is not out of anger, but out of love, fulfilling her duty as a parent to care for her offspring, even after death. These stories of protective ghosts are a powerful testament to the bond between the living and the dead. The Urei are driven by the same emotions that they experienced in life: love, care, and devotion. They are often seen as benevolent spirits seeking to shield their loved ones from harm, and their return serves as a reminder that love does not end with death. It is a love so strong that even the afterlife cannot sever the bond between parent and child, between husband and wife, or between any two souls who shared a deep connection. Yet another reason for a ghost's return is the need to fulfill an unfinished duty. This is a more complex and nuanced reason for a spirit's lingering presence. The desire to complete something left undone in life, whether it is a promise, a task, or a vow, can drive a spirit to return, not out of anger or love, but out of a sense of obligation. These ghosts are not looking for revenge or offering protection. They are simply driven by a need to complete what was left behind in the mortal world. The tale of the samurai who returns after death to complete a mission left undone is a powerful example of this type of spirit. A samurai who was slain in battle, unjustly, and before he could fulfill his sworn duties, comes back from the afterlife to carry out his mission. This samurai ghost is not vengeful, nor is he protecting his loved ones. He simply needs to finish what he started in life. His return is a testament to the honor and commitment that guided him during his living years, and his spirit is driven by the same values: integrity, loyalty, and duty that governed his actions in life. In Japanese culture, these stories reflect the belief that death is not the end of one's responsibility. Even after a person passes away, their commitments and duties may still bind them to the world of the living. The spirit of a person who dies with unfulfilled responsibilities is often said to be trapped in a state of limbo, unable to find peace until their task is completed. Through these powerful examples of revenge, protection, and unfinished business, we see the complex roles that ghosts play in Japanese folklore. These spirits are not mere entities floating in the ether, but are deeply tied to the human experience, carrying with them the powerful emotions and unresolved issues that linger long after death. Whether driven by anger, love, or duty, the ghosts of Japan remind us that death is not the end of our stories. It is merely the beginning of a new chapter, where the spirits of the past continue to shape the lives of the living. In the end, these stories offer us a glimpse into the emotional world of the dead, reminding us that sometimes the dead do not leave us quietly. They return, seeking resolution, protection, or revenge, driven by the powerful forces of love, loss, and obligation. And in this world where the line between life and death is so finely drawn, it is clear that the spirits of the past continue to haunt the present, ensuring that their stories are not forgotten. In the captivating world of Japanese folklore, the ghostly figures that roam the afterlife are often seen not just through stories, but through powerful visual representations that have become iconic in both traditional art and cultural memory. Particularly during the Edo period, 1603–1868, the image of the Japanese ghost, or Urei, evolved into a haunting and distinct figure. Marked by its eerie, supernatural appearance, these spirits were often depicted as pale, floating figures draped in white burial kimonos, with long, flowing black hair that seemed to cascade endlessly. sometimes leaving the spirit without legs or a physical form altogether. The Edo period marked a time of cultural prosperity and artistic flourishing in Japan, with the rise of woodblock printing, kabuki theater, and other artistic forms that helped shape the visual language of the supernatural. It was during this period that the image of the ghost began to take on a more defined, standardized form, one that would become ingrained in Japanese culture and resonate deeply with generations to come. The Urei, or spirits of the dead, were often seen as unfinished souls, lingering in the mortal realm because of unresolved emotions, vengeance, or unfinished business. These spirits, who could range from protective and benevolent to vengeful and angry, were frequently portrayed in art as ethereal, otherworldly beings. In the woodblock prints of the Edo period, artists began to craft a visual style that both captured the fear and the beauty of the ghostly presence. The pale, ghostly figure, often shown floating above the ground in a delicate, weightless manner, became a signature element of ghostly art. The long, white burial kimono, a symbol of death and mourning, was used to emphasize the otherworldliness of the spirit. These kimonos, typically worn by the dead, were stark against the darkened, often misty backgrounds, enhancing the spectral, haunting nature of the figures. The most striking feature of these depictions was the long, flowing black hair, which seemed to have a life of its own, tangled and wild. In many depictions, the hair hung down to the spirit's knees or even further, giving the impression of a being trapped in eternal sorrow. This long hair was not merely a physical detail. It was symbolic of the spirit's anger, confusion, or sadness. In the case of Onryo, vengeful spirits who had returned to the living world to seek revenge, this disheveled hair mirrored the chaos and torment that consumed them. The appearance of the hair was often wild and unkempt, visually representing the turmoil that these spirits had experienced in life. What truly set these ghosts apart, however, was the absence of legs in many of the depictions. In these images, the spirits floated above the ground, disconnected from the earthly realm, emphasizing their supernatural status. This floating quality made the ghost appear both untouchable and inescapable, a being that could not be confined by the physical world. The lack of legs added to the disembodied, unsettling nature of the spirits, as if they existed in a world of their own, a liminal space between life and death. The eerie, unsettling images of ghosts from the Edo period were not only designed to provoke fear, but also to convey a sense of mystery and reverence for the spirits of the dead. These depictions were often used in kabuki theater, where actors would perform ghostly plays that depicted the tragic tales of the Onryo, and in woodblock prints that told stories of vengeful spirits and the supernatural world. In these art forms, the ghostly figures were more than just images of terror. They were metaphors for the unresolved emotions and spiritual unrest that permeated the human condition. What makes these representations so powerful is that they offer a glimpse into the complexities of life, death, and the emotions that bind the two. The Urei depicted in these artworks are not simply passive spirits. They are manifestations of intense emotions: love, vengeance, grief, and regret. Whether as protective guardians or as malevolent spirits, these figures serve as reflections of the human experience, highlighting the deep-seated fears, desires, and unresolved feelings that can persist even after death. The lasting influence of these depictions can still be seen today in modern interpretations of Japanese ghosts in films, anime, and literature. The images of pale, floating figures with long, black hair have become iconic representations of Japanese horror, continuing to haunt the cultural imagination. These ghostly images from the Edo period are more than just visual representations of the supernatural. They are expressions of the complex emotional landscape of both the living and the dead. Through these powerful images, we are reminded of the enduring legacy of Japan's rich folklore and the eternal connection between the past and the present. The rich and haunting world of Japanese ghost lore has deep roots in the country's ancient spiritual practices. These legends and beliefs surrounding spirits, often referred to as urei, are not simply the product of imagination, but are shaped by centuries of animistic beliefs, ancestor worship, and the introduction of Buddhist teachings. These early spiritual practices laid the foundation for a complex and ever-evolving understanding of the supernatural, which would go on to influence Japan's cultural, artistic, and social landscape. At the heart of Japanese ghost lore is animism, the belief that all living and non-living things possess a spirit or soul. In ancient Japan, this animistic worldview considered nature trees, mountains, rivers, and rocks as inhabited by spirits, which were seen as both benevolent and malevolent forces. These spirits, known as kami, were integral to the Shinto religion, the indigenous belief system of Japan. In this animistic world, every natural element was imbued with life and purpose, and the spirits of the natural world were just as real and present as those of the human world. This connection to nature was foundational for the development of Japanese ghost lore. Early tales of urei, restless souls of the dead, emerged as the spiritual beliefs of the time recognized the importance of maintaining a harmonious relationship with the spirits of ancestors and the natural world. In Shinto, ancestor worship was central to maintaining peace and prosperity. It was believed that the spirits of the dead continued to influence the living, offering guidance and protection. However, if a deceased person was not properly honored, or if their spirit was neglected, they could become restless and vengeful, haunting the living as urei souls that had not yet found peace. This notion of restless spirits was further reinforced by the introduction of Buddhism to Japan, which began around the 6th century. Buddhism brought with it a rich cosmology that included concepts of suffering and rebirth. One of the most significant ideas introduced by Buddhism was the notion of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and the belief that souls could be trapped in a state of suffering if they did not achieve enlightenment. This belief in suffering souls merged with Shinto practices, creating a unique blend of spiritual teachings that influenced how the Japanese viewed the afterlife and the spirits of the dead. As Buddhism spread throughout Japan, it introduced the concept of preta, or hungry ghost souls who, due to negative karma, were condemned to suffer eternally from unfulfilled desires. These preta were often depicted as gaunt, emaciated beings who were never satisfied, constantly tormented by their insatiable hunger. This Buddhist idea of suffering souls reinforced the belief that spirits, especially those who had passed without proper rites or who died tragically, could become tormented and vengeful. The merging of Shinto's ancestor worship with Buddhist notions of karma and suffering laid the groundwork for the development of Onryo, vengeful spirits driven by powerful emotions such as anger, jealousy, and grief. The blending of these two religious influences gave rise to an intricate and layered understanding of the afterlife. The fear of being haunted by restless spirits was not just about the dead's unfinished business, but also about ensuring that the souls of the deceased were treated with the proper respect to avoid the torment of being trapped in a state of suffering. Ancestor worship became crucial in preventing the souls of the dead from becoming urei, or Onryo, vengeful spirits that sought revenge for perceived wrongs. The offerings, prayers, and rituals performed by the living were seen as essential for guiding the souls of the dead to a peaceful resting place and protecting the living from their wrath. These spiritual practices shaped the way Japanese people viewed ghosts and spirits, leading to a profound respect for the deceased and a deep fear of upsetting the balance between the living and the dead. As a result, the traditions of ancestor worship, along with the Buddhist teachings on suffering and the afterlife, created a unique belief system that embraced the idea of the dead, lingering among the living in various forms, whether as protective Urei, who watched over their families, or as Onryo, who sought vengeance for their unjust deaths. Throughout the centuries, these early beliefs and the blending of Shinto and Buddhist concepts have continued to influence Japanese ghost lore, shaping the way spirits are portrayed in literature, art, and theater. In the Edo period, for example, artists began to depict ghosts in haunting images that conveyed their supernatural, otherworldly presence, pale figures with long black hair, often shown without legs, floating between the worlds of the living and the dead. These depictions echoed the belief that spirits were not bound by the physical world and could appear in any form, driven by the powerful emotions that had tethered them to the mortal realm. The origins of Japanese ghost lore are rooted in these deeply held spiritual beliefs, which emphasize the importance of honoring the dead, understanding the consequences of unresolved emotions, and recognizing the interconnectedness between the living and the spirit world. Whether through the sorrow of Urei, the vengeance of Onryo, or the protective watch of ancestor spirits, Japanese ghost lore remains a testament to the country's complex relationship with the supernatural, a relationship shaped by centuries of animistic beliefs, ancestor worship, and the teachings of Buddhism. These stories not only reflect the fears and hopes of the living, but also offer a window into Japan's deep respect for the unseen world that exists just beyond the veil of death. Japanese ghost lore, deeply ingrained in the cultural and spiritual fabric of the nation, draws from two primary religious influences, Shinto and Buddhism. These traditions, each with its unique understanding of death, the afterlife, and the spirits of the dead, have shaped the way spirits are perceived and represented in Japan's folklore. At the core of Japanese ghost stories, we find a blending of Shinto's focus on ancestor worship and the belief in restless spirits, with Buddhism's concept of preta-hungry ghosts and suffering souls. This fusion of beliefs has created a rich, complex system of supernatural entities, all tied to the emotions and unfinished business of the living and the dead. Shinto, Japan's indigenous religion, places a strong emphasis on the reverence of ancestors. In Shinto belief, spirits, or kami, are not confined to the gods of nature, but also encompass the spirits of the deceased, especially those of family members and ancestors. Ancestor worship is central to Shinto practice, where the spirits of the dead are honored through rituals, prayers, and offerings, to ensure that they continue to watch over and protect their descendants. This belief fosters a strong connection between the living and the dead, with the spirits of ancestors believed to influence the fortunes and well-being of the living. However, not all spirits were thought to rest peacefully. The concept of restless spirits, Urei, emerged from Shinto beliefs, wherein the spirits of those who were not properly honored or whose deaths were traumatic became trapped in the mortal realm. These Urei were believed to haunt the living, often because they had unfinished business, lingering emotions, or had not been given the proper rites needed for their peaceful transition to the afterlife. The idea of Urei reflects the fear that neglecting or dishonoring the dead could lead to the return of vengeful spirits. This notion would later evolve into the more sinister Onryo, vengeful spirits who return to seek justice for perceived wrongs, often driven by intense emotions such as anger, jealousy, or sorrow. Buddhism, which entered Japan in the 6th century, brought a different view of the afterlife, adding a layer of complexity to the understanding of spirits. Central to Buddhist teachings is the concept of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. In this framework, the dead were not only concerned with their unresolved emotions or unfinished business, but also with the karma they accumulated during their lives. Buddhism introduced the idea of preta, or hungry ghosts, who suffer from insatiable hunger and thirst due to their negative karma. These preta were souls trapped in a state of constant yearning, unable to fulfill their desires in the afterlife. In Buddhist cosmology, these suffering spirits were believed to be condemned to wander the earth, tormented by their unfulfilled cravings, unless they were appeased through specific rituals. The merging of Shinto's Urei with Buddhist teachings about preta created a more nuanced understanding of ghosts in Japanese folklore. Spirits that were restless or vengeful, like Onryo, and those trapped in suffering, like preta, shared a common characteristic. They were souls that had not moved on from the earthly realm. This dual understanding of the spirit world, one based on the idea of proper ancestral veneration, and the other focused on karmic suffering, shaped the way the Japanese viewed the dead and their influence on the living. The combination of these beliefs led to a deeply ingrained cultural practice of rituals and offerings designed to appease restless spirits and ensure their safe passage to the afterlife. In Shinto, rituals were performed to honor ancestors and prevent them from becoming Urei, while Buddhist rites were used to alleviate the suffering of pretae and help them attain peace. One of the most well-known practices is the Obon festival, a time when the spirits of the dead are believed to return to the living. During Obon, families perform rituals, offer food, and light lanterns to guide their ancestors' spirits back to the afterlife. This festival blends Shinto and Buddhist elements, reinforcing the importance of maintaining the connection between the living and the dead, and ensuring that the spirits are properly honored and cared for. These spiritual practices also gave rise to a rich tradition of ghost stories and folklore. The belief in restless spirits and suffering souls created a deep-seated fear of the dead and the consequences of neglecting the dead's needs. It was said that if a person did not perform the necessary rites, or if they mistreated the dead, they could bring misfortune or disaster upon themselves. These fears became the foundation for many of Japan's most famous ghost stories, such as those of the Onryo vengeful spirits who returned to punish the living for the wrongs done to them in life. In the visual arts, especially during the Edo period, this fear of restless spirits was often depicted in haunting images of pale, floating figures, sometimes dressed in white burial kimonos, with long black hair cascading down their backs. These ghostly images not only reflected the fear of vengeful spirits, but also embodied the complex spiritual beliefs about life, death, and the afterlife. Whether driven by anger, sorrow, or the desire to fulfill an unfinished duty, these spirits were shown as trapped between worlds, unable to find peace until their desires were met. In conclusion, the blending of Shinto's ancestor worship and the Buddhist concept of preta created a unique and deeply spiritual understanding of ghosts in Japan. The spirits of the dead, whether they were vengeful Onryo or hungry preta, were viewed as active participants in the lives of the living, influencing their fortunes, their happiness, and even their survival. The fear of these restless and suffering souls gave rise to a cultural practice of honoring the dead and appeasing their spirits, a tradition that continues to shape Japanese culture and ghost lore to this day. The Edo period, 1603–1868 in Japan, was a time of remarkable cultural and artistic development, during which ghost stories became a dominant theme in literature, theater, and popular culture. This period saw the rise of a unique form of entertainment that focused on the supernatural and the eerie, particularly the tales of vengeful female ghosts. These spirits, often driven by deep emotional turmoil and a desire for retribution, became the central figures in many well-known stories, with figures like Oe and Okiku rising to iconic status. The Edo period thus marked the golden age of ghost stories, with both literature and kabuki theater playing key roles in bringing these chilling tales to life. The Onryo, vengeful spirits, were particularly prominent in these ghost stories. These spirits were typically women who had suffered great injustices during their lives, betrayal, abandonment, or mistreatment, and returned from the afterlife to exact revenge on those responsible for their suffering. The idea of a wronged woman seeking vengeance was a powerful theme in Japanese folklore and became a central element of Edo ghost stories. These spirits were not just passive entities, but active, often dangerous forces, driven by emotions such as anger, sorrow, and a desire for justice. One of the most famous Onryo stories is that of O.A., a woman who was betrayed and killed by her husband. Her ghost, disfigured and consumed by rage, returns to haunt and kill her unfaithful husband, ensuring that her revenge is carried out. The image of O.A. became a haunting symbol of the vengeful woman, her face twisted with grief and anger, her spirit forever bound to the mortal realm by the trauma she experienced in life. This tale of betrayal, revenge, and the unstoppable force of a wronged spirit was a theme that resonated deeply with Edo audiences and became a staple of ghost stories during the period. Similarly, the story of Okiku, another tragic and vengeful spirit, became widely known during the Edo period. Okiku was a servant girl who was wrongfully accused of losing a valuable plate and, in her desperation, was murdered by her master. After her death, her ghost returned to haunt her killer, counting from 1 to 9 and letting out a terrifying scream when she reached the missing 10th plate. This story of wrongful death and the unrelenting desire for justice became a well-loved and chilling tale, often depicted in kabuki performances and woodblock prints. Okiku's image, her ghostly form with wild hair and a mournful expression, became one of the most iconic representations of a female ghost in Japanese culture. Kabuki theater, a vibrant and popular form of entertainment during the Edo period, played a crucial role in bringing these ghost stories to life. In kabuki plays, actors would perform the tales of Onryo with dramatic flair, capturing the intense emotions of these spirits and their thirst for vengeance. These performances were not just horror stories, but also explored deeper themes of love, betrayal, and the consequences of mistreating others. The ghostly figures of Oe and Okiku were often portrayed as tragic heroines, their spirits trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead, unable to find peace until they had exacted their revenge. Kabuki theater's depiction of these spirits was often accompanied by elaborate costumes, music, and special effects that heightened the supernatural atmosphere. The characters of Oe and Okiku were portrayed with long, flowing hair, pale faces, and white burial kimonos common features in depictions of Onryo. These visual cues were meant to evoke fear and emphasize the otherworldliness of the ghosts who existed in a liminal space between life and death. The tragic stories of these spirits, combined with the dramatic performances in kabuki, made Onryo tales both terrifying and emotionally poignant, capturing the audience's imagination and leaving a lasting impression. Literature also played a vital role in popularizing ghost stories during the Edo period. Writers compiled collections of eerie tales, many of which focused on the vengeful Onryo. These stories were passed down through generations, with themes of betrayal, death, and supernatural justice becoming staples of the literary landscape. One of the most famous collections of ghost stories is Ugetsu Monogatari, Tales of Moonlight and Rain, a series of ghostly narratives by Ueda Akinari that blended traditional folklore with new, imaginative tales of spirits and the afterlife. These stories often featured Onryo, or other supernatural beings, whose emotional turmoil and desire for justice created a compelling narrative for readers. The popularity of these ghost stories was not just confined to the theater and literature, but extended into visual art as well. Woodblock prints from the Edo period often depicted the iconic images of Onryo, such as the disfigured face of Urei, or the haunting image of Okiku counting her plates. These prints helped to further solidify the cultural imagery of these vengeful female ghosts, ensuring their place in Japanese folklore and continuing to influence how ghosts are depicted in modern times. In conclusion, the Edo period was a defining time for the development and popularization of ghost stories in Japan. The Onryo, vengeful spirits of wronged women, became central figures in literature, kabuki theater, and art. The tragic tales of Urei and Okiku capture the imagination of Edo audiences, reflecting deep cultural fears and anxieties about death, betrayal, and the consequences of mistreating others. Through dramatic performances, literary works, and visual art, these ghost stories became iconic representations of the human condition, emotionally charged, tragic, and often beyond the reach of redemption. The legacy of these vengeful spirits continues to haunt the cultural imagination of Japan, ensuring that their stories are told for generations to come. The 19th century brought about a dramatic shift in Japan's intellectual landscape as Western rationalism and scientific thought began to take hold, challenging long-standing cultural beliefs in the supernatural. This wave of rationalism, driven by the spread of Western ideas during the Meiji Restoration, led many to dismiss ghost stories and supernatural beliefs as superstitions. With the rise of modern science and the development of a more empirical worldview, the idea of ghosts, spirits, and supernatural beings seemed to lose their grip on Japanese society, particularly among the intellectual elite. The belief in Urei and Onryo, the vengeful spirits, and other yokai that had flourished in the Edo period, appeared to be fading away, relegated to the realm of folklore and superstition. However, despite this shift towards rationalism, the fascination with ghosts and spirits remained deeply rooted in Japanese popular culture. While intellectuals may have dismissed them as mere fantasy, the stories of vengeful ghosts and restless spirits continued to captivate the masses, appearing in books, plays, and even oral storytelling traditions. The Onryo, those tragic, vengeful female ghosts, did not fade away. They merely adapted to the changing cultural climate. In fact, the 19th century marked a transition in how ghost stories were perceived, with traditional beliefs about spirits being preserved in new forms of media One of the key figures responsible for reviving interest in Japanese ghost lore during this period was the Greek-born writer and folklorist Lafcadio Hearn. Hearn, who moved to Japan in 1890, became fascinated by the country's rich traditions of ghost stories, folklore, and the supernatural. He understood the deep cultural significance of these stories and set about documenting them. In his writings, Hearn's work helped to preserve and popularize the tales of Onryo, yokai, and other spirits, ensuring that they would not be forgotten in the face of Western rationalism. Hearn's most famous collection, Kwaidan, Stories and Studies of Strange Things, 1904, brought together a wide array of ghost stories from Japanese folklore. In his writings, Hearn delved into the nature of the spirits and the emotional depth behind the ghostly tales. He was particularly drawn to the stories of Onryo, like Urei and Okiku, the vengeful women who returned from the afterlife to seek justice for their suffering. By presenting these stories with sensitivity and respect, Hearn was able to capture their haunting beauty, which in turn reintroduced them to a broader audience. His work not only preserved these ghost stories, but also elevated them to a place of cultural pride, emphasizing their role in Japanese identity. Hearn's influence was profound, as his writings revived the interest in Japanese folklore, even among those who had embraced Western rationalism. His ability to blend the traditional with the modern allowed the ghost stories of Japan to be seen as more than just superstition. Rather, they were part of the country's cultural heritage, rich with meaning and significance. Through Hearn's work, the Onryo and other spirits were reimagined as symbols of justice, loss, and the emotional struggles that transcend life and death, making them relevant even in the modern age. Despite the rise of rationalism, ghost stories continued to evolve and find new life in popular culture. As Japan entered the 20th century, Onryo stories began to be adapted into new forms of media, including films and theater. The iconic image of the pale, floating female ghost with long black hair, dressed in a white burial kimono, continued to haunt the cultural imagination. These images, deeply rooted in Edo period art and theater, found a place in modern horror films, where they continue to symbolize the powerful emotions that drive ghosts and spirits to seek vengeance or resolution. While Western rationalism sought to dismiss ghost stories as irrational beliefs, the enduring popularity of Onryo and other ghostly tales shows the resilience of these stories in Japanese culture. They were not easily dismissed, as they held deep emotional and cultural significance for the people of Japan. Ghost stories offered more than just supernatural thrills. They were expressions of grief, loss, and the complex human desire for justice. The persistence of these tales, despite the rise of scientific thought, demonstrates the enduring power of folklore to connect people with their past, their fears, and their shared human experiences. In conclusion, while the 19th century saw the rise of Western rationalism and skepticism toward the supernatural, ghost stories continued to thrive in Japanese culture. The works of folklorists like Lafcadio Hearn played a crucial role in preserving and revitalizing these stories, allowing them to be appreciated not only as traditional folklore, but also as an essential part of Japan's cultural identity. The Onryo and other spirits that once haunted the stage and page in the Edo period continued to captivate the imagination, ensuring that the ghostly tales of Japan would never be forgotten. Despite the rise of skepticism and the growing influence of Western rationalism in Japan during the 19th century, ghost stories continued to remain a vital part of Japanese culture as intellectuals embraced scientific thought and dismissed supernatural beliefs. The spirits and legends that had once flourished in folklore and theater seemed to be fading into obscurity. However, rather than disappearing, these ghost stories underwent a transformation, evolving into new mediums and finding renewed interest in modern Japan. By the 20th century, ghostly tales not only persisted, but thrived in new forms, particularly in cinema, where they were adapted and reimagined for contemporary audiences. The 20th century saw the rise of Japanese cinema, a medium that would breathe new life into traditional ghost stories. Just as the kabuki theater had played a key role in bringing Onryo tales to life during the Edo period, cinema became a powerful tool for depicting the supernatural and showcasing the emotional depth of Japan's ghost lore. Japanese filmmakers, influenced by the rich tradition of ghost stories, began to create films that drew from the iconic imagery and themes established during the Edo period. The pale, vengeful female ghost, often depicted in white burial kimono with long black hair, became a central figure in Japanese horror films, echoing the haunting presence of Onryo, such as Oe and Okiku. The imagery of the Onryo, a spirit driven by revenge, grief, or unfinished business, was adapted into films like Ringu 1998 and Ju-on, The Grudge 2002, both of which became international successes. These films introduced modern audiences to the terrifying figure of the vengeful female ghost, with long black hair obscuring her face and a sense of unstoppable, malevolent force that transcended the boundaries between life and death. In Ringu, the ghost of Sadako, a girl wronged in life and driven by a vengeful spirit, became an embodiment of the Onryo archetype, a tragic figure whose haunting powers had devastating consequences for anyone who came into contact with her. The sense of terror evoked by her ghost was not simply about fear of the supernatural. It was about the emotional weight of her unresolved death and the desire for revenge. This resurgence of interest in ghostly traditions was not just about preserving ancient folklore, but also about reinterpreting these traditional stories to address contemporary anxieties. Modern ghost stories in Japan, particularly in cinema, explore themes of trauma, societal alienation, and the lingering effects of past wrongs. These themes are deeply rooted in the emotional foundations of the original Onryo legends. In many ways, the fear generated by these films is not just about the supernatural elements. It is about confronting the unresolved emotional pain of the past and the consequences of neglecting or mistreating others. Just as in the Edo period, where Onryo sought revenge for betrayals and wrongful deaths, the modern vengeful ghosts in these films serve as symbols of emotional devastation and the failure to address deeper, unresolved issues. Cinema allowed for new methods of storytelling, using visual effects and atmosphere to evoke the chilling presence of these spirits. The eerie, otherworldly appearance of Onryo with their pale faces, long black hair, and floating forms was brought to life through haunting cinematography and unsettling sound design. The ghostly figures of the past were now able to move beyond the confines of the stage and the page, becoming fully realized entities that terrified audiences in cinemas across the world. The combination of modern technology and traditional storytelling created a unique space for Japan's ghost stories to evolve, ensuring that they remained relevant in a rapidly changing world. Beyond cinema, the resurgence of interest in folklore and ghostly traditions was also seen in literature, anime, and manga, where the Onryo and other supernatural beings continued to appear. These stories not only kept the traditions alive, but also brought them into contemporary contexts. The exploration of ghosts and spirits became a way for modern audiences to engage with Japan's cultural past, while also reflecting on the anxieties and challenges of the present. Much like Lafcadio Hearn did in the late 19th century, modern creators tapped into the deep emotional resonance of these tales, exploring themes of love, loss, and vengeance, while simultaneously confronting the societal pressures and personal struggles of modern life. The continued popularity of these ghost stories in various forms of media highlights the enduring power of the supernatural in Japanese culture. Despite the rise of skepticism and the embrace of rationalism, ghosts, particularly the Onryo, remained a powerful symbol of unresolved emotions and the complex relationship between the living and the dead. Through cinema, literature, and other media, Japanese ghost stories found new life, bridging the gap between the traditional folklore of the past and the modern world. In conclusion, while Western rationalism in the 19th century sought to dismiss supernatural beliefs, ghost stories remained a deeply ingrained part of Japanese culture. These tales, which began in ancient folklore and were popularized in kabuki theater, adapted to new mediums like cinema, where they underwent a resurgence. Modern filmmakers and creators have kept the essence of Japan's ghostly traditions alive, ensuring that the Onryo and other spirits continue to haunt the collective imagination, blending the supernatural with contemporary societal concerns. These stories prove that, even in an era of skepticism, the haunting presence of ghosts is far from fading. Rather, it evolves, adapting to the ever-changing cultural landscape. Japanese ghost stories, particularly those that have endured for centuries, are far more than simple tales of terror. They are a window into the cultural psyche of Japan, reflecting deep-rooted fears, societal values, and the complexities of human emotions. These stories are rich with moral lessons and social commentary, teaching audiences not just about the supernatural, but about the consequences of betrayal, neglect, and the intricacies of human relationships. From the vengeful Onryo to the protective Urei, ghosts in Japanese folklore often carry with them powerful messages that continue to resonate with people today. At the heart of many Japanese ghost stories lies the theme of unfinished business. The restless souls that haunt the living are not merely seeking to instill fear, they are driven by a desire to resolve what was left incomplete in life. This could be a relationship undone by betrayal, an act of cruelty unpunished, or a death that was not honored properly. These themes, while rooted in the supernatural, reflect the importance placed on duty, respect, and honor in Japanese society. The consequences of neglecting these ideals are portrayed through the spirits that return to seek vengeance or closure. One of the most well-known figures in Japanese ghost stories is the Onryo, a vengeful spirit, typically a woman wronged in life. The Onryo embodies the devastating consequences of betrayal, particularly in the context of relationships. One of the most famous Onryo stories is that of Oiwa, a woman betrayed by her husband, who, after her tragic death, returns from the afterlife to exact revenge. Her disfigured ghost, consumed by rage, seeks to punish her unfaithful husband, leading him to madness and eventual death. Oiwa's story is not just one of horror. It is a cautionary tale about the destructive power of betrayal and the emotional devastation that can arise from unfulfilled love. It serves as a reminder of the importance of loyalty, trust, and respect in relationships. Similarly, the story of Okiku, another Onryo figure, reflects the consequences of betrayal and injustice. In her tale, Okiku is falsely accused of losing a precious plate by her master, and she is murdered in cold blood. Her ghost returns to haunt her killer, counting the plates she had been entrusted with, and when she reaches the missing plate, she emits a chilling scream. Okiku's story highlights the moral lessons of fairness, justice, and the perils of deceit. It also explores the profound emotional impact of a wrongful death, where an innocent person's soul cannot rest until the injustice is acknowledged and avenged. Through this narrative, the audience is reminded of the need for truth and honor, particularly in matters of power and authority. Beyond betrayal, many Japanese ghost stories delve into the theme of neglect. The fear of neglecting the spirits of the dead or failing to properly honor one's ancestors is central to Shinto beliefs. In Shinto, ancestor worship plays a crucial role in maintaining harmony between the living and the dead. Neglecting the dead or failing to perform the proper rituals can lead to the spirits becoming restless or even malevolent. This theme is often explored in ghost stories where the living suffer due to their failure to care for the deceased or to fulfill the deceased's final wishes. For example, the Urei restless spirits of the dead are often depicted as souls who have not received the necessary rites or rituals, leaving them unable to find peace. These spirits are usually driven by a desire to be recognized, honored, or avenged. A famous example is the story of the Zashiki Warashi, a spirit that haunts a house, bringing good fortune if treated well, but misfortune if neglected. The Zashiki Warashi represents the idea that spirits of the deceased have a role to play in the well-being of the living, and that neglecting the proper rituals and respect can lead to dire consequences. These spirits often serve as a reminder that the living must maintain their responsibilities toward the deceased, both out of respect for their ancestors and for their own well-being. The ghost stories of Japan also serve as social commentary, reflecting the values and anxieties of the society in which they were created. The tales of Onryo, for example, often explore the vulnerabilities of women in feudal and patriarchal society. These ghosts are frequently depicted as women who have been wronged by their husbands, lovers, or masters, and their vengeful spirits reflect the emotional and social constraints placed on women in these societies. The Onryo can be seen as symbols of resistance, fighting back against the injustices and abuses they suffered during their lives. In this sense, they embody the fear of women's power, particularly the power of a woman scorned, as well as the broader societal fear of retribution for inequality and mistreatment. These stories also reflect Japan's deep connection to the spiritual world and its relationship with death. Death in Japan is not seen as a final separation from the living, but as a transition into another realm where the spirits of the dead continue to have influence. Many of Japan's ghost stories explore the emotional turmoil that accompanies death and the sense of unfinished business that often follows. This is not only a reflection of the fear of death itself, but also the cultural belief that the dead are never fully gone. The spirits of the dead continue to live on in the memories of the living, and their presence is ever felt. In literature, the ghost story is used as a tool to explore human emotions, specifically the complex feelings of grief, anger, love, and revenge. Whether in a tragic Onryo tale or a story of a protective Urei, the ghosts of Japanese folklore serve as mirrors to the emotional struggles of the living. These spirits are not just figments of horror. They are reflections of the unresolved emotions that plague the human heart. The return of the dead is often symbolic of the emotional burdens that cannot be ignored, no matter how much time has passed. The resurgence of interest in these traditional ghost stories in the 20th and 21st centuries through films like Ringu and Ju on The Grudge shows how these themes still resonate with contemporary audiences. These films tap into the same emotional currents that have run through Japan's ghost stories for centuries: fear, grief, betrayal, and the unresolved emotional wounds of the past. The ghostly figures of these films, particularly the Onryo figure, are not just there to scare the audience. They are representations of the deeper emotional issues that people face, even in the modern world. These spirits continue to serve as a medium for exploring the complexities of human emotions, reminding us that, just like the characters in these ghost stories, we too carry our unresolved emotions and unfinished business. The conclusion: a bridge between past and present. Japanese ghost stories go beyond the simple purpose of entertaining audiences. With tales of horror and suspense, they are deeply rooted in the cultural fabric of Japan, offering moral lessons, social commentary, and reflections on the human condition. Through tales of Onryo and Urei, the spirits of the dead in Japanese folklore embody the consequences of betrayal, neglect, and the unfinished emotional business that connects the living and the dead. These ghost stories provide insight into the fears, values, and emotions that have shaped Japanese society for centuries, making them more than just legends. They are profound reflections of the complexities of life, death, and the human heart. As these stories continue to evolve and find new forms in modern media, they remain a powerful tool for exploring the timeless emotional struggles that define us all.